So what we're going to do in a moment, we're going to go over to the whiteboard and we're going to talk about the idea of this political alignment graph. In the political alignment graph, first we're going to talk about economic freedoms, where economic freedoms go from the far left to the far right. Check it out. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, so what we're going to do now is look at this thing that I call the political alignment graph. I published this in Nation of Change in 2012, if you wanted to look up that article. It's a little hard to find now, but you can go back and you actually can see this, and we have a link to it in where you can just get the grayscale one of it, which looks pretty good. But we're going to talk about now is this idea that the left and the right have been ascribed kind of all this weight in the way we think about politics. But I say, let's divide that out so that we're just talking about economic freedoms and social freedoms. Let's separate those, because depending on your political sway, you may be more inclined to agree with economic arguments and not the social arguments, or vice versa. But somehow they're going to work together. Let's first get rid of this main notion that the left in America is the extreme left. The extreme left in economic freedoms would be that the government or the collective would have all the economic power, or the power of means of distribution, of production and distribution, okay? And distribution, okay, are completely government owned or collective owned, right? So way over here. Now, is this, think about America, and do you think that the means of production or distribution are owned by the collective, by the government? Certainly not. I mean, the roads are free. That's the thing that we could say we own as American citizens. Our government owns the roads, owns the bridges. Yeah, who takes care of those roads is typically private industry. Private industry is being given that task, right? So what is the regulation on how strong a bridge has to be? All that stuff is on economic freedoms, right? No factories are being owned and run by the United States government. For a time, in order to save the car industry, the Obama administration did essentially protect that business from going under by grabbing it, by supporting it through that time of a critical loss of jobs in the car sector. Now, what would be the far right then? The far right would be no regulation on private industry, okay? So instead of this far left idea where the means of production and distribution are completely controlled by the collective, by the government, by the people, or no regulation on private industry, okay? Now, what would that lead to? Well, right now you see it. You see during the coronavirus pandemic, the Trump administration has opted to allow businesses to dump their effluent into your streams, places where you'd like to go, perhaps, and go fishing. Well, you're not going to want to fish that fish if it comes out, green, some kind of strange color fish, right? Glowing in the dark with the third eye from The Simpsons. So no regulation on private industry. That would be the farthest right that we can imagine, where industry and private business controls every aspect of our society. So if you were to think now about this far left and this far right. Now, you've been told for decades that this far left is where all the Democrats wanted to go. But no, they've always been the center. They've been in this, we need to regulate over here. We need some regulation to make sure we're safe. So this is more regulation. So down to very little regulation, and this is ownership, right? More ownership goes that way. More regulation goes that way, right? So ownership or regulation, which one are we considered? As you progress further and further, we're getting less and less regulation, more and more regulation to the side here, obviously. So less regulation, more regulation. So we want, say, a contract to be regulated under the courts. So the courts are publicly owned, right? So we don't want private courts. That's crazy. Would that be crazy? I think so. I mean, I think it's completely unacceptable to have so I'm like private prisons. No, so personally on prisons, I would be prisons. Come on, we got to own prisons. We got to be able to control what goes on there. There shouldn't be big profit-making industry. But if a prison's way over here, they don't even keep anyone safe. You got COVID-19 ravaging these places, and these people are making a whole bunch of money. So depending on where you are on that, so what do you think about prisons? Should they be privately owned, or should they be publicly owned? Should those be assets? Like, should we be making sure that criminals are staying off our streets, but also safe? If there's no, we don't want cruel and unusual punishment, like having to go through a terrible disease like COVID-19, for instance, right? But what about banks? Banks in America, the Fed was privatized. Way over here, so the Fed is owned by private industry, and they get to control a lot. They get to control basically how our monetary policy works in America. Yeah, sure, the government has something to say about it, but essentially, whether we control the interest rates through printing money or whatever can be controlled at the Fed level. And, it's this kind of weird, fairly right of center idea. So certain banks, when the financial crisis of 2008 into 2009 occurred, a lot of banks were just going out of business. So instead of, let's give all these banks a bunch of money, let's bail out all these banks, certain states made public banks, right? Why not? The public bank is not going to do these risky swaps and different things to try to make their CEOs a ton of money. So if banks are way over here, right? Banks, and they're unregulated, a completely unregulated bank industry tanks that. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the idea of social freedoms in another video. All right. Well, think about this. Think about where you see this. Do you think that they're really secret Marxists that want all the means of production and distribution only collectively? Come on. Is that really where you think America is going to be? Like if you voted for Bernie Sanders, suddenly he'd be over here. No, Bernie's a little bit left of the center of these economic freedoms. Own some things, make sure things like healthcare are taken care of. The other folks the Democrats have been trying to find this middle ground of economic freedom for a while. You got to regulate it a little bit because people are going to be doing this. So you've got this group of center-right, Democrats, and then you've got a few progressives that might come over here. Let's try to understand that. We don't exactly, everyone's a little bit different. And if you talk about these things, if I talk about prisons and I say, I want full public ownership of prisons, I don't think that's totally radical. Why should these guys be making millions, taking a big cut off of our tax dollars to run shoddy prisons where they do a terrible job? So that's where I am. I'm going to be a little bit left of center on that. Should we have private roads? Should the roads be all owned by some guy and he tolls you every time you go past? I don't think so. That's not ideal, right? So where you have America set up like this, the economic freedom scale is along the right and left. So tell me what you think about this in the comments. Anything you want to say about the far left, like a Democrat like AOC is a far left, like probably not, right? You can't imagine when we talk about the social freedoms, you'll see this idea how it fit into the Soviet Union communism. Not communism, but Soviet communism being a different aspect of that. All right, let's check this out in another video. Thanks so much for being here. Please remember to like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot and gets these ideas out into the world. Thank you so much.